I'm talking today about the Great Feminization. It's a book review of a book by a J. Stone that came out in October 2025. The book was well received. It got a lot of press, particularly by a woman named Helen Andrews. And it turns out Helen Andrews is the author. But the book is rather critical of a lot of feminization, and she probably didn't want to take the flack, so she originally was anonymous. It's a hard book to review. Just about every page has something worth talking about. So I'm trying to track the book chapter by chapter. My slides here sometimes, frequently, use her chapter headings. My objective is to make a 20-minute talk hard to do justice in that time, so I invite you to please buy the book if this is not satisfactory for you. So her introduction, she says, men had control of society, of culture, pretty much throughout history until the 20th century. Second half of the 20th century mainly, and then women took over and they became dominant in the workplace, in the legal system, in the courts, and in institutions. They have become the dominant factor, and this is the first time this has happened in human history. Female thinking now dominates our culture. The influencers of our society, the people we listen to, and as politicians and media, whatever, are increasingly female, and the people who pay attention, the people who act on what they hear, are predominantly female. The voters, they operate more by emotion than by logic. This has been said about women throughout history, and Andrews agrees with her, and so do I. And men have been relegated to spheres that really don't interest women, such as outdoor work, defense, and investment. Investment's a curious one. Men have always dominated investment. That's because we deal in the realm of risk, and as we'll get to, women just aren't that comfortable dealing with risk. So what is male logic? It goes way back, but it was kind of formalized in the scientific method with Francis Bacon in the 17th century. You form a theory based on widely accepted facts, or really other theories, and you come up with a system of testing, and you find out if it's true or not. If it meets the criteria of tests, it stands the test of time, it may be true. This is the scientific method. You argue logically from premises. We had some hard fights. We had to overcome superstition, folklore, folk medicine, religion. The big argument about the Darwinian theory of evolution opposed to the Genesis account of man was created in the Garden of Eden. And then we have to fight vested interests. This has been very true in medicine. There was a theory of phlogiston and so on. It fought the germ theory of disease. There's the theory that bloodletting and leeches were how you cured people. And there's a theory about vaccines that's hotly debated today. Are vaccines useful? The medical community is very heavily invested in them. Many people are arguing. Scientific method ought to be used to figure it out. It is argued, however, more by emotion than by logic. The day the logic died, she talks about. a woman's goal is power, not really truth. So scientific method goes for truth, not always, but it's headed that way. But women are more inclined to want simply to win. It owes more to Saul Alinsky than it does to Aristotle, Descartes, or Nietzsche. Emotion overpowers logic. And therefore, what we're headed for, what women are headed for, is not the optimal solution. John Stuart Mill's greatest good for the greatest number. No, it's headed for a victory. Doesn't matter whether it's the best for everybody, if it is a victory, if it serves what the women want. And they copied this from the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and in fact from early feminists going back to the 19th century who argued emotionally and won. Her first chapter has this big case in point, Larry Summers. The day the logic dies, according to her, was when Larry Summers was fired as the president of Harvard. Here's what happened. Harvard University in the first decade of the century had a concern that there were not a great number of women in the STEM departments, science and math, and particularly not as department heads, leaders of these departments. And there was some concern that this was unfair. So they had an off-the-record, closed, no notes taken meeting to discuss the problem. And Larry Summers, as the president of Harvard, was an outstanding economist, had served in a couple of presidential administrations, offered his opinion. He said, first of all, women are not terribly interested in this sort of thing. And women are more interested in things that have more to do with people than abstract thought, and they're better represented in other departments in the university. And many of them take time off for having children and one thing and another, so they don't work as hard, as many hours as the men. Point number one. Point number two. Women's average intelligence is just a smidge less than men. And this is because women's brains mature earlier when they have sexual maturity at the age of 18 or 19, whereas men's brains continue to develop until their early 20s. Men's brains are physically bigger. So they have a little edge. And number three, the standard deviation of the distribution of men's intelligence is wider. So whereas women's intelligence is divided on a bell curve like this, men's is the bell curve like this, with more total idiots, the women will readily concede that, and more geniuses. Larry Summers explained all of this. This is only a reiteration of what science has known for 100 years, and there are many books to back it up, and there were in fact many people, including a lot of women, who came out and supported Larry Summers. It didn't matter. The women said what he said was abhorrent, hurt their feelings, they couldn't breathe, they couldn't cope with it. He shouldn't have said it. They made a very emotional argument that it hurt their feelings, and that argument carried the day. He was fired. That's her first chapter. She talks about the Great Feminization. Throughout history, women depended on men for protection and for resources, so they could devote themselves to raising children. And men took the risk of fighting to defend the tribe while the women raised the children. This was a division of labor. And women did what it took to get what they needed from men. They charmed us, They asked us, they pleaded, they begged, they wheedled, they nagged. They did whatever it took to get what they needed. And if those who were most successful were able to raise the most children to maturity, and the men who were most susceptible to their pleas were the ones who left the most children. So this behavior of women asking was evolutionarily successful. That's how we got to dominate the world. But having gained control, women still behave as if all resources were controlled by men. That is, they kind of imagine that there's a cornucopia of all good things out there, controlled by the patriarchy, by those nasty men, and all they have to do is get it from us. So they just get what they can, and they have less practice allocating scarce resources, and every resource, jobs, money, food, everything is limited, and they don't have the evolutionary experience allocating scarce resources, and they pretend that it's endless. And in the era of the Great Feminization, you may notice that every developed country in the world has an unbalanced budget. We're spending more than we're taking in tax revenue. We borrow, and world debt is going out of control, and that's because nobody has a handle on it anymore, and it's largely because women have got the right to vote, and they're not used to this kind of stuff. Her title, A World of Pain. Scientific method is a male thing. Women now dominate academia. They dominate certain fields such as experimental psychology, sociology, and so on. And the academics that's being performed is done by women who do not share male respect for free inquiry. No, they want something that favors women. So the scientific papers being published now are things that women will allow to be published. If you want to say something that they don't like, it won't get published. If you say things from the podium that they don't like, you'll get fired from your job as a professor, or at least sidetracked. I experienced this personally as a graduate student at the University of Maryland. They hated me because I wouldn't knuckle under. I was 60 years old at the time and had nothing to lose, but I certainly saw what was going on at the University of Maryland, but it's happening everywhere. What gets rewarded used to be what men awarded to other men without help from women, and then we didn't care what they thought. If we had a solution that worked, it would be adopted. And men were kind of critical of each other. We'd argue about what would work, but we could get together and say, that works, that's what we'll do. Women succeed, however, by winning the argument, by complaining until they get what they want. And this has worked too. Hence the vastly unbalanced budgets everywhere in the world. They get what they want. And there's been a shift toward compassionate public expression and reasoning. So, oh, those poor Somalis, they had it so tough in Somalia. Give them whatever they need. So we give them welfare hotels and everything else. But don't ask the question, does it work? It doesn't matter if it works or not. We do what makes us feel good. And it's led to her title again, System Failure. Women now are the majority of voters, and the men have become feminized. We were raised and taught by women. There were no more cap guns and schoolyard fights. I'm not a fighter, but when I was a kid, I fought on the schoolyard because everybody did, because kids picked fights. Now the women intervene. No, you can't go bang, bang, bang. You can't fight. You can't do anything. We are hectored to abandon our toxic masculinity. Great American products and brands, Gillette razors, Harley-Davidson motorcycles, Jaguar automobiles, dominated by the woke philosophy. And by the way, going broke. But they tried it because they're dominated by feminist men. We have fewer male hormones. The amount of testosterone has gone down measurably, like 40–50%, just over the course of my lifetime. I think I was able to get married a third time because I still have my own quota of testosterone, reduced by age, but at least it was there in the first place. We are becoming feminized. Women are more easily moved to do something, do anything. Whereas men would say, is this affordable? Does it make sense? Should it be a priority? Women just say, do it. So vast resources are expended on problems that can't be solved. The abortion question can't be solved. Habitual criminals can, by and large, not be rehabilitated. They can never be made into productive citizens. And drug users very rarely get rehabilitated. There are exceptions, but not enough to justify what is expended on these problems, but we do it because it feels good. Welfare. We give out tons and tons of welfare. There's a lot going to Ukrainian refugees in the West right now, and to refugees from all over the world. Will it turn them into productive citizens? No. It encourages them not to. Disincentive. And their families in the United States have been on welfare for 3 or 4 generations, and we keep pouring money out for their kids. Meanwhile, we don't have money to raise our own kids. All of society is browbeaten into a new system of laws and rules. Her headline again. Equal opportunity is abandoned. We don't care that people have equal opportunity to attempt to achieve. We want to see equal outcomes. And they discriminate against white people because we have been successful for too long. They blame it on something we do that they can't see that's illegal and immoral, rather than maybe we're just good at what we do. Maybe we rose to dominate the world 100 years ago because we had the ability that others didn't. And they've outlawed and eradicated any speech that might upset anybody. In particular, you can't give a speech like this in most venues because it'll offend women, and you certainly can't speak against Muslims in England, Germany, or France because somebody will get offended, even if what you say is true. And they've invented new terms. Women have ushered in new terms for abortion. It's family planning. Illegal aliens are undocumented immigrants. Insanity is now a mental health issue. Hobos are homeless people, and so on. We soften the language so we can't talk about real problems with real words. And academic freedom, to go back to another theme, now becomes academic justice. Academic freedom is not saying what is demonstrably true and obvious. It's saying something that won't hurt anybody's feelings. Now, women don't want to talk about these issues. Once again, Andrews' heading, and I'll give my own example. Toastmasters women don't like speeches like this. I've been told to shut up. I don't shut up. Women typically have less knowledge and are less interested in things like this. They don't want to ask the questions because they might find out. Now, I'll give credit. There are a lot of brave women who do, like Helen Andrews, but there are many, many more, a subject for future speeches, but certainly far from a majority of women. Most women, the majority of women, don't want to think about it. It's okay with the women if travesties happen, such as here in Ukraine. USAID plastered the Kiev metro with posters showing men holding hands and saying, go get tested for AIDS, despite the fact that although homosexuality is fairly well accepted here, we don't want to advocate it, and it's not a very popular issue. Who cares? They're on the side of social justice. And they're oblivious to what other people think of it. Another title, Women in Nature. Men are closer to nature than women, just by the nature of our jobs. Women see nature from a car window when they go on vacation or they take a nature hike or something. But their emotions supersede common sense. They get all wrapped up in when somebody wants to build a pipeline through a national park, but save the environment. They don't really understand, for the most part, the measurements of that environment, and they don't understand the trade-offs involved. That's the kind of economic thinking that characterizes men more than women. They don't understand about endangered species. Now, in very rough numbers, throughout recent history, that is, last 100 million years, a species goes extinct every year, and about 2 new species emerge every year. Well, the new ones don't emerge because the change is gradual, and you don't see them when they emerge. You do notice them when they disappear, but not that many even are disappearing. The numbers don't matter. It's an emotional argument. And women can't assess the cost of saving the snail darter or the spotted owl. Today's news is that they're killing 50,000 barred owls because they're crowding the habitat of the spotted owl. Why are we involved? But it's our sentiment, save the spotted owl. We do things that are stupid. Men have spent all of our evolutionary history fighting, risking, and civilizing by virtue of our testosterone. We have a lot of this male hormone that makes us do things. And we ask the question, will we let bullies rule over us? The European Union, led by von der Leyen and other ladies, was quite reluctant to confront Putin when he invaded Ukraine. And likewise, Joe Biden, who was elected by women, was also expected not to oppose Putin. Putin made this calculation. Turns out he was wrong, but the main thing that proved him wrong was that we in Ukraine are still real men, and we fought back until the rest of the world felt embarrassed and came to our aid. The British are reluctant to stop the rape gangs. The Pakistani grooming gangs are grooming white girls in Britain, have been doing it for 2 decades, doing it in Finland, doing it in Spain, Germany, elsewhere, and people are reluctant to say anything about it because we'll hurt the feelings of the poor Muslims. Or worse than that, they'll get mad and they'll come cut us up with knives, and we don't want that. We're reluctant to talk about remigration, sending these people who don't fit in, don't want to assimilate and become like us, back where they came from. We can't talk about it. And it's mostly women that don't want to talk about it. Women are risk averse. We're the guys who have testosterone, they don't. Men have testosterone. We fought to protect our tribes. Women, less testosterone. What they do is they protect their babies and they don't worry about what happens. Aside from that, they protect their babies. That's what they evolved to do. They don't think about financial risks. They believe the government when they say there will be pensions there, even though looking at the deficits, there's no way they'll have pensions. But it's comforting to believe the government. And they avoid life decisions that might involve investigation, like, for instance, to vaccinate your kids. If the pediatrician says that's what you should do, they'll do it without thinking about it. Do women have a surrender reflex? Asks Andrews. Yes, they do. In the great apes, when the male great apes in this tribe kill the male great apes in that tribe, kill the babies so the women will come into estrus again and can have their babies, what do the women say? The women say, okay, because they will be able to reproduce. Their DNA will go on. They don't particularly care that their males got killed. So it's the men who fight for the tribe because they have to, otherwise they'll die. But the women give in. Women are kind to, and they manipulate the men that take over. And this is also true in human society. When men are victorious, they kill the men and rape the women, marry the women. We have Neanderthal blood in us, we Europeans. Believe me, it wasn't out of the goodness of the hearts of the Neanderthal men. We did it. Women are more tolerant. They tolerate the Muslim takeovers in English cities. Many of them have Muslim mayors, American cities too. The black takeover of major American cities, which are going downhill. They tolerate theft. In California, if you shoplift less than $1,000 worth of stuff, you can walk out the store and the store owner gets in trouble if he tries to stop you. They steal elections with impunity. And public education is collapsing. The children of the very women who oppose doing anything are being very badly prepared for life because the education is terrible, because it's hard to educate the children of people who aren't very smart in the first place and don't care about education, and you can't throw them out of the classroom. It's hard to educate those kids. Your kids are in class with them. They don't get educated either. Women are not moved to do anything about it because it would involve conflict, which they hate. So the women have taken over the institutions in the battle of the sexes. Women have achieved equality, but what they really want is dominance, and they dominate a great many institutions. They've taken over kindergarten through 12 education long ago. Universities, now they dominate in the undergraduates and they dominate in the young professoriate, so they will soon have total control in the universities. They've taken over law and medicine, many other fields. They have more staying power, more ability to put up with the tedium of being in an organization, doing things following the rules. The sexes are different. We have different group identities. The women see themselves as an oppressed minority and stick together. The men are looking for what's the best way to do things, and not supporting the other men. Let's find the best solution. And we have different ways of thinking. Once again, the women may be inclined to, let's throw some money at this problem because, oh, those poor Somali refugees, oh, those poor drug addicts, those poor homeless people, we need to put them in a shelter so they don't suffer. Whereas the men will say, can we afford it? Will it work? Different ways of thinking. Andrews says this is an insuperable challenge for men because women don't act the way they used to. They've discarded their submissiveness. that characterized them throughout evolutionary history, and they now seek control. And their tactics are ones that we're not used to. They condemn men as sexist. They hound men out of their jobs, like Larry Summers. They shut us up, as I've been shut up many times in Toastmasters, but also on Facebook, YouTube, Amazon, other places where I post my ideas, because women have dominated those particular companies. And men have only a dim awareness, or have had only a dim awareness of what was happening, because we evolved to compete against other men in our own hierarchies. That's how we compete. We've competed as a team of men against other teams of men, different tribes, different companies, but we haven't competed against women. We've looked at them as our partners, our helpmates. So we're not used to competing against women, and we're not used to competing against the devices they use, the verbal devices, their complaining, nagging, and so on, and the arguments. And we have been losing ground to them very significantly. Women don't welcome the idea of a great feminization idea because it might undermine their contention that they have been oppressed and that they have a distinctive mindset. They think differently, not that they're right, but that they think differently than we men do. And the changes are not progress, the changes are the women won because they dominated us. They don't want to hear that. So they don't want to think that there's any reason to question the way they see things. The Great Feminization invites scrutiny. Irrational female traits, emotional sensitivity. Yes, women do think emotionally. They don't want to talk about it. They're susceptible to social contagions, such as recovered memory. In the 1980s, under hypnosis, people had recovered, reconstructed childhood memories of being abused, girls abused by men in their lives, and particularly in child care. And it led to a number of terrible false accusations against men for crimes that are totally imaginary, that were put in their minds by psychiatrists. There was Finding Ophelia, the nonsense that little girls were being shortchanged just because the boys waved their hands more vigorously in class than girls. The boys acted like boys, but the girls didn't suffer. The Me Too thing, believe all women thing, that all men are rapists. This has gained a lot of ground. Women don't want to ask the question. Women fear such scrutiny. Andrews says that the Great Feminization is a threat to society because women prefer kind of rigid, because I said so, conformity over Western values, such as, you read here, independent thought, free debate, free inquiry, and due process of law. Believe all women is not due process of law. They don't want to see a preference for inclusivity and equity displaced by a thought of merit, that the best guy ought to get the job. No, women ought to get the job, or at least a certain percentage. Fair play, the old notion of fair play, is passé. Women want to continue to do whatever feels good to solve a problem now rather than look for long-term solutions. We men tend to say, let's see if this really makes sense and if it'll work over the long term. So I'll close in asking, is discussion of Helen Andrews' ideas off limits? Should it be off limits? It seems to be put off limits maybe this woman, this brave woman, has made it a legitimate topic of discussion. I certainly hope so.